a Christian positive affirmation. I am strong and courageous because God is with me. I am worthy of love and respect because I am made in God's image. Okay, so hi everybody, this is Christian RPG Gamers. So for today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe just some different hypothetical ideas for building some different like lore or some different character backstories or some stuff like that for if you're playing like like a tabletop RPG game. Now, I think the background from this is when I was playing it was called Ancestors Legacy. It's like a real-time strategy. I don't know, it is what it is, right? I'll probably work on some more backgrounds at some point this next week or two. But okay, so what are some different hypothetical ideas for different I guess like different backstories for your character or different lore or your different when you're like character creation or all that kind of stuff. So obviously you're gonna have to get together with like your game master before you play, and you're gonna have to probably talk to your game master a little bit about it. I would probably recommend so again, there's several different ways you can go about this. One pathway is you can ask your game master about the Pacific world that they're building, and see if you can get your character to be somewhat aligned with the world that they built, so that way it can make more sense. And I'm not. Okay, some of the stuff is a little bit like on the idea of like subjectivity. So like a lot of role playing your character and a lot of immersion and stuff. These things are really more about like flavor. It's like you're eating a meal, right? Like playing Dungeons and Dragons is like eating a meal, and all these extra things. It's like you could just eat today because you need to eat, or you should eat, or you're gonna die if you don't eat. Or maybe some of us eat too much, but like it's like adding extra. Maybe you put some extra spices on it, or you make it look a little more pretty, or maybe it's like a little more well made. All these things, they add an extra level of enjoyability, and you'll remember and savor like the flavor later on. So like this stuff is important, but it's not really like it is vital in a sense, but it's not gonna like it's like you have the mechanics of the game itself, but all of these things they have value, and like I do think it is important. So so you can and there is several different ways you can approach it. So like again, you also can just build your own character. After again, obviously you got your mechanics of your character, right? But like you can build your own like idea for how and why you want your character to be. You can try to come up with stuff on your own, then you can just show up, and it really depends on how well do you know your game master, or how well do you know the party you're with. But you can kind of just build the character, and then like the character probably become like assimilated into the group or into the world. It might quote unquote like make sense or something. And sometimes you gotta fudge your character in a little bit. But if you're playing in like a fantasy world, say your character was like like an elf, and you part of an elven group, 100 miles away from the main campaign, off to some area, and reasons, your character's in the story. You can kind of fudge it in or whatever, right? She was a rogue or something, or some terrible thing happened, and she needed money, and she went to travel some area and worked for a caravan protector or something, and now she's with you and she's looking for some quest. You can kind of fudge these stories a little bit. It's like, again, like you don't want to like have them be so heavily in depth to the point where like what do you call it? Like, you can't even like, you have no flexibility either, but it's like it's probably not going to be the most enjoyable experience if you don't have anything down for your character. But it's also it's a good experience, I think, to be somewhat adaptable and flexible. Like, again, like the more work you put into it, I think the better and more interesting it'll be. So like, if you know your character, you can make your own little story for your character, and it really starts to help you flesh out the little details, and it starts making more sense. And then if you tell the game master your story, and you give them a little spiel about it, and you have a little biography, or you have more details, again, like, the game master can help you to kind of shift your character's story into like actual part of the world. Because like, not in like, if it's fantasy or if it's more realistic, they can push you in a certain area. Like, maybe your character was an elf, right? Like, I was using that before. Or like, he was part of some tribe in some area, and maybe the game master already has a group of elves, and like, your story can just be shifted partially over. So maybe he was like a warrior in like elven tribe, and there's another elven tribe in his world already, and you were he can put you in the clan, or he can give you some certain name, or maybe he makes up a special like little area for your character to exist in. Like, the more fleshed out that is, the less work he will have to go through, and the simpler and easier. And also, your character will, I think, it'll be simpler and easier. Also, it will make a level of sense. And again, like, also, this stuff is, in my opinion, is extremely fun. It's very enjoyable. Like, at the end of the day, you get out what you put in. So, like what does the Bible say, right? You reap what you sow. So like, if you're you put in, like, you say for instance, you put 5 hours worth of effort in to building some lore or backstory or character ideas and designs. Maybe you sow all those seeds, you spend all that time working on it, you implement them for your character, you talk to your game master, you get together with your group, you spend a lot of time enjoying it, and altogether, say you put like 10 hours worth of time playing it, enjoying it, experiencing it, and maybe within the course of 20 years, you're gonna reap how much more back that you put in. Maybe one day your campaign will be over, but you still might remember that experience, and you had like a great time. You built this awesome character idea. Like, look at the guy, like a legendary professor, I think it's called like J.R.R. Tolkien. He's not even alive. He built this amazing world with all these characters, and people still love it today. And that's pretty cool, isn't it? And someone else might take some kind of inspiration from what you built, and you never really know. And I mean, like, it is definitely very cool. And like, you don't necessarily, again, like, you don't want to go too crazy at the same time, but again, like, you want to leave some kind of rooms of gaps open, or I mean, like, it really depends on like your personality, or even like your character's personality, like. And like, also, there's again, like, there's the class that you're playing as, like, say for Dungeons, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. You have your class, and you also have like your race, and you have like your background, and then there's maybe a couple other extra special details you could add on, and all those things can like, you have your alignment, maybe you have your name, you have some certain, maybe you have like a special couple, like a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 qualities for your character. And like it really can, like they can like you also, it's probably more wise to do more synergetic. Like certain things just work really good with other stuff. I mean, like you can kind of think, I mean, like some of this stuff can be manipulated a little bit, but like certain backgrounds work really good with certain classes, like certain races. I know it's like there are some stereotypical characters, like say for instance you have an elf, like an elf who is a ranger who comes from like like the outskirts or something, or you're like you're good at you, you're good at certain things, and maybe you have a certain type of personality, or you're like maybe like a little more like chaotic good. Maybe you had like a tribe, or you had a group of people you were with, or maybe you're more by yourself. Maybe a little more cold personality, or like a hunter or something. And maybe you have like one really good friend you used to be with, and again, like you kind of like being by yourself a little bit more. I mean, like you're probably pretty good at firing a bow and arrow. And maybe probably like the nature a little bit, like again, it's a little bit like stereotypical, right? But sometimes it's okay at the end of the day. Or for example, say you were a dwarf. Maybe you're a dwarf, you're like a fighter, you use an axe and use a shield. You have some kind of like a clan, and maybe you use like heavy armor. And then like again, like some of the personality, and this is more stereotypical, right? Like honestly, you can even look at like like Legolas or like Gimli or something. But yeah, like you go out to like the bar and you drink alcohol a lot, like a big beer or something, and like you can fight pretty strong. And like again, like that could be like another idea of like more of like a stereotypical, right? Stereotype. Maybe you have like a good group of friends that you're with a lot, and that could kind of define a separate idea for a character. Or like maybe you're like a human, right? You're a human who's, I don't know, I mean there's just so many different types of stuff you can do. You could be like a human and maybe like a bard, and maybe you kind of grew up in like entertaining, or maybe more stereotypical, right? Like you could be like a halfling, or you could be human, or you could be like a halfling, or you hang out with a bunch of people and you're like a charlatan kind of a background. Maybe you entertain, but you also you have to steal, or maybe like a little bit like a bard, maybe even like a little bit like a rogue. I guess like depending on how you want to look at that. And like maybe you kind of hang out with different groups of people. Maybe you're a little bit shady, or also you're pretty charismatic because you're pretty comfortable being around a lot of different people, and you have to maybe lie your way out of situations, or maybe just like having fun at the same time. But like you could build a little bit of background, like different types of classes and races and backgrounds. They some of them are easier to mix and match together than other stuff. I mean, it also depends on what you want to do. Like you could have like a gladiator background, maybe like a little bit like a barbarian. Again, maybe you can even be like a half orc, and like you like fighting a lot. Maybe you had some kind of also you can kind of mix and match these a little bit. I mean, most of these are just kind of for flavor. Like you could be like, you have a little bit of some military background maybe, and you enjoy like killing enemies in the battlefield or something, or you're like this pursuit of like personal sense of glory. And again, like it could just, you coming up with different ideas, and these things can help you kind of build your personality for your character a little bit too. And like you can come up with different, like maybe you can come up with a different idea as to something that would happen, right? Now this is a fantasy world, but again, like maybe in Holiness the right hand of God caused something to happen to your life, and sometimes the things that happen to you, good or evil, can help define who you are. Um, Maybe you had like a tragedy in your life. Some terrible event happened. Say you and your family was living together in a little tribe. Again, like, I'm not saying this is like directly Christian. I mean, I want to put some kind of Christian spin on it, but I don't like forcing narratives. But say, like in Holiness, like the right hand of God dictated that your little village was going to get attacked, and they come in and they just, I don't, not make this too dark, but it's too dark. They just like come in, they just burn the village down, and they just slaughter and do terrible things to all the people. And then, maybe you just happened to get away. Or maybe you didn't get away and you were a slave for like 10 years. And eventually you got free. And this kind of a scenario, like sometimes an event, can really define your character's personality and some of their story. Because like maybe you were a slave and then you got free. Or maybe you had a chance to earn your freedom by like working really hard or fighting in battle. So, along your way of fighting in battle, you meet a friend, and then you and your friend, when you were like 12 years old, were growing up, and you trained together in battle, and you built this strong bond between you and that person. And then because you had this bond, you worked together in the battlefield, and then maybe eventually you started growing up and you went some new place, like you met some new person, and say you became like a caravan, like bodyguard. I think I was talking about this a little bit before, and because you're in a caravan now, you talk to the caravan master, and he teaches you a bunch of stuff from his life, and maybe that gives you some skill, and like maybe you're better now. You're good at bartering. You're just good at getting a better deal because you hung out with people who barter for a living. Now you get some skill in this or something. And sometimes it doesn't have to really make sense. It's just who you are as a character, right? Like why were you what you were? The same thing with like in real life, right? It might not make sense, but like it is who you are, right? You met this caravan master, and then eventually you traveled all throughout the continent you were in. You were in this big continent and had like 20 cities or something, and you traveled city to city. You spent some time in taverns, and you learned how to talk. You learned how to talk to, like, I don't know, your caravan master was fond of drinking alcohol and hanging out in bars with innkeepers. And, you spent a lot of time with innkeepers, and maybe you learned a little more how to gossip or something. Or you learned some rumors. It helps you to get better at being better at adventuring. Then maybe one day you hear, or maybe, different positives and negatives lead you to different outcomes. Maybe in Holiness, the right hand of God, what does the Bible say? Like the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. It's like the ocean current, right? A wave will come and it'll slam into something and it'll knock something down, and they'll go, and then it'll pull it back out to the ocean. One day to spit it back out again and to pull it back in. Like, it gives and it takes away. Or in Holiness, like God gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Maybe in Holiness, God gave you a family, and one day He took away your family. Obviously, it's a little fantasy world. I don't know. God in heaven, He transcends time and space, but, or whatever your quote unquote false deities or whatever you want to call them, and then they're not real either way. But maybe God gave you some friend in the village, and then you grew up with a family, and then a bunch of dwarves came in and raided your family or something. I don't know. They killed them all, and now you have a new friend. God gave you those nice things and took them away. Maybe He gives you access to this person, and that friend has gone out of your life for 10 years. That friend eventually, then He gives you someone. God in heaven, He gives you someone new. He gives you that caravan master now, right? And maybe eventually the caravan master decides he's going to take his business somewhere else, and you got a special quest and you're involved in some other area. I don't know, you meet some princess and you fall in love with her, and you decide you want to start spending more time in her region. The caravan master, He's got his own life. He goes to a separate continent that you're not even in. He goes by boat. You say your goodbyes, and you spend more time in this new area, right? Now the caravan master's gone, and you got new opportunity. And you're spending a lot of time with this princess. Maybe you get a letter in the some courier sends you a letter, and that letter says that your friend died in battle, the friend that you knew from a long time ago. And maybe it makes you really sad, and that really impacts you a lot, right? And this story, I mean, this little, we call it, little message you get. Your character is really sad, so your character starts drinking lots more. He hang out at bars, and now he drinks lots of alcohol. And it makes his personality really bitter and sorrow. Drowning your problems away with alcohol. By the way, that's a really terrible idea. But I mean, like, it's just a story, right? Makes him bitter. And maybe, his princess, the princess, or maybe they got married. They lived in some castle or something. And maybe she's not the queen regent, but she's just a princess, and maybe there's like 7 princesses, but she was like a younger daughter or something. And you and her have big problems. Maybe you get divorced or something, or you start having issues. And bad problems leads you to having like a bad personality, and it causes you a lot of grief and suffering. And eventually, maybe the right hand of God offers you a new opportunity. And again, he gives and he takes away. The same thing with like a story or with a lore. And all these things would affect your character, right? You could affect your backstory, you could affect the lore, affect your sense of immersion. It's like, a character, and maybe to be honest, at that point, that's when your character joins the campaign. Again, I was just kind of making this up, to be honest, but it's definitely interesting, right? And maybe your character's like 50 years old. Maybe he's an elf. All right, and he's an elf, and elves live to, it depends on your story. Maybe your elf lives to 200 years old, and your elf currently is like 50 years old. And, maybe you had a pretty bitter backstory, but you had good moments too. And, you need some more money for your quests. Maybe, there's conflict in your kingdom, or conflict in the marriage or whatever. Or maybe he did a lot of this to himself at the end. And for whatever reason, your elf joins your party in your campaign. Because, maybe he just needs to find his way in life. And maybe that's where your story starts, right? It could be a really interesting idea. Now you get a whole bunch of stuff, like why were you here, right? Why were you put here in this world? Like, where did you come from? You came from a village that got raided. You spent 10 years as a slave until you were 20 years old. Eventually you got out. You were able to join a little military excursions, and you made a new friend. You learned how to talk to people. You joined a tavern. You started going out to taverns. You made friends with the caravan master. You learn how to explore the world. Maybe slowly learn how to become an adventurer. You learn how to get better at managing your money. And you learn the positives and the negatives of life. And you learn that life can be brutal. But life it can be like bittersweet. And maybe that's your little story. And obviously I just kind of made this up, but you never really know, right? And now you've got a reason for why your character exists. And also, you can just kind of role play this out, right? You can just kind of maybe just make a story. Just make something up in your mind, or you can write down the different twists and turns, and that can determine, why your character is why he or she is, and why they came from. And, that's sometimes just a great way to build a backstory. And also, it can be a lot of fun. You never really know what's going to happen. And it seems more real and natural that way too. Because most people are not just one-dimensional. You have a lot of positives and you have a lot of negatives. And your actions have consequences, and the consequences of your actions will impact who you are and who you're going to become, or what your future is going to be. Again, good or evil. Sometimes evil things can lead you to a good outcome, and good things can lead you to a bad outcome. So also bad things can lead you to a bad outcome, and good things can lead you to a good outcome. You never really know. You have a minimal level of control, but again, like what was the little story that I made, right? There was some of those things in the little story. The character didn't have any control over. He couldn't control that his parents chose to give birth to him. He couldn't control, where his homeland was at. He couldn't control that, his home got raided. He couldn't control that he was enslaved. He couldn't really control the fact that he got an opportunity, right? After terrible things happened to him, he got an opportunity to get stronger. So he learned how to get strong, and he found a level of glory. Or maybe he found favor in his master's eyes. In holiness, maybe God gave him favor. And again, I'm not sure where I was trying to go with this, but again, this is just positives and negatives. Again, the different choices you make can define who you're going to become, but you also can't control what those outcomes are going to be, because you never really know. The character's bad decision, say he became very bitter towards his wife, and that caused a lot of tension in the family household. And because he became bitter towards his wife, or he started treating her badly, or he started getting himself massively drunk, he basically was forced out of his little home and his easy, comfortable life, and now he has to go out and do more adventuring, or have to do something else in his life. But he also, again, he couldn't control the fact that his good friend died in battle, but he could control the choices he would make. So it's all these little details, they all kind of add up to equal what your character is going to be. And sometimes having flaws is interesting. And it's highly interesting, isn't it? If your character was perfect. Now, I'm not going to go too heavy into this. They call it a Mary Sue, a perfect character. That's not very entertaining or interesting. It doesn't make for good role playing. It doesn't make for good immersion. It doesn't make for a good story. Honestly, that's pretty boring. A character that's heavily flawed is going to be making interesting choices in the world. So, leaving room for your character to make. And also, if you make decisions that could be deemed as quote unquote bad decisions or poor choices, it could equal interesting outcomes. And you might not be happy with it, but it is what it is, right? So maybe if you make bad mistakes, just kind of roll with it. If it feels natural to what your character would want to do, maybe just roll with it, and maybe you can build an awesome story. Or maybe your character just dies, and you have to make a new one. But sometimes that's just life. All right, so there's just some hypothetical decisions, right, or different scenarios. All right, I just wanted to say, thanks for watching the video. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are on this situation or scenario, or what kind of characters have you built in the past, or what's your Christian point of view on looking at a story like this. I know that in Holiness you can read the Bible from God. God gives stories to different human beings. He lets them be written down in the Bible. You can read different stories of different characters. Granted, they're all dead at this point, but they did exist at one point. I mean, they don't anymore, but they did. Or do you think that God is the one who is responsible for all these different choices and decisions behind the scenes, even in fantasy worlds? And some of these are hard questions. What are characters that you've built And what are decisions that you made, and what are the outcomes of those decisions? And were you happy or unhappy with them at the end of the day? Or for your little characters in the story? Or what are your thoughts about this stuff? Or do you think that stories should have either no flexibility or lots of flexibility? Or how fleshed out should they be? Alright, let me know what your thoughts are. I appreciate you watching it. God is good.